I have been working on something that I actually would love to share my screen and show because I think that you'll find this pretty cool. And basically, if we look at this here, but this is MCP UI, which I have
Mhm.
heavily modified to make it OAuth enabled so that I can actually go and I can connect the Xano MCP tool, which requires OAuth to be able to use it. So now it works here because I added auth powers to it, let's say. And over here, now this is going to do this weird thing where it rejects the first one, work in progress. But before I actually click, I'm just going to show one thing that's nice. I can choose different AIs, right? And that's already
Mm.
something that I like about having my own MCP client. But what is the real point of this is I was trying to demonstrate basically what this could look like if we were able to maybe just get something visual back in terms of the responses that we're going to get from these tools, not just text, but can we enhance it? And because I was just inspired by the Shopify approach. And we'll just wait a second here and you can see it shows the tables in Xano. So now I can actually see the tables and I can click expand. I like that little expand feature, and I can click full screen. I can see all the tables. So this is just like a demonstration, but I think that there's potential with this, right? Here it even shows me the schemas, right? So I can see now the schema in Xano and be able to just, again, like I think about trying to bring technology to people who are not necessarily in building like this, in a new paradigm of building. And I can appreciate that like a lot of the techniques and strategies, it's like developers building for other developers, which is great. Like I think that drives a lot of the innovation. But when I look at something like this, I look at it and I think that this makes it so that we're able to actually build in the chat window and appeal to a certain group of people which I think is a large group of people that would just want to build this way. But even if they don't, the whole point is the fact that I think that this is just cool and it has a lot of use cases, even if it's in a different way than I imagine it. And like this, for example, I like how this shows the table content, for example, pulls all of it and it just shows you like, here's what you have on Xano, right? And like, I can just go and click full screen. So without having to go over to Xano, I can start to make changes. This can go very deep. This could turn into it asking you visually, hey, which endpoints do you want? Click here. And here's the menu of options that you have for being able to create this. Click on it, like actually click on these buttons, and you'll be able to request the next action basically and kick off the next series of steps. So this is my demo.
Yeah, this is neat. I'm curious, did you build this on Vercel? I see the Vercel app.
I built it on Vercel. I deployed it on Vercel.
Or yeah.
So it leverages a few different SDKs. It leverages the AI SDK from Vercel, which is great. Like it absorbs a lot
Mhm.
of the complexity for when we look at this and we want to display tools, we want to modify how these tools display themselves. Even, for example, like when we look at this tool, I modified it so that if there is a visual resource that's being returned back as part of the response, then it's not going. Vercel AI SDK makes it so that we can control these little details. Like you can see here, it says show technical details. I want to hide that by default. I don't want to show that. And this is what it was looking like. It looks cleaner if it just keeps popping up in that more minimal state, just focusing on this aspect. And even just for this, right, to expand outside a little bit beyond the chat. Yeah, like the Vercel AI SDK is great for that. And the MCP SDK is really fantastic for being able to make this possible, basically. Like this combined with the Vercel one and then combined also with another SDK for OAuth. So it's a bit of a Frankenstein, but it's working, right? And here, this is actually good. So this shows a bit of that interactivity. If you're able to, you can click on full screen. Let's say this is again, like just a demo, but like to say that you can click and have it react to you, right? And show you more information. Again, like this is just more of a demonstration. I'm not sure how much passion I have for building this out. I'm sure there's a group of people that would love for this solution to be built out further and further. But I just think about even the other things, right? There's probably a lot of people who imagine their application when they see this, they can see what they've been looking for, right? They would want, this can encourage somebody to take further action or to use their application in all kinds of ways. Like I even just imagine like an invoicing tool, for example, like FreshBooks. If it was delivered in this way, it would show you as, hey, do you want to send out your invoice for this week? And then it would show you the buttons, right? Like there's a whole different way of working with software that I can't even really imagine. But yeah, I think that there's a ton of applications for something like this. And I think that, again, like people are visual creatures and you can use the Xano tool in Cloud Code and that's all great. But I do think, or at least I feel intuitively that there's this polish that if you were to bring in something visual and to meet people closer to that experience that really caters to them and puts options in front of them and takes their feedback and then drives other actions, I think then you'll get a totally different reaction. You'll get a totally different group of people who want to use a tool and so on.
And Robert, just to clarify, so like you've got your own MCP client in, is this essentially your snappy MCP visualized? Is that like with the UI part?
Yes.
Is that a good way of thinking about it?
It's two ways. It's basically the MCP client is prepared to display these visual components, right? Like that's why I have to use my own client, because in itself, it is prepared to display visual things. Actually, you can see here, I have another one called Fi, right? I didn't make this one, obviously. This is from Shopify. However, if I were to use this tool, it will show and it will display here, because the MCP client is prepared to display anything visual from servers that return that type of information. On the server side, on the Xano tool side, what I did was I modified it so that on top of the responses that it was giving, it was also returning back an additional response now. And that additional response is that visual structure, that essentially a template that tells it, hey, you're going to use this template and these are the ways you can modify it. And then the AI takes that resource and it manipulates in order to put the information that is dynamically receiving and working with. Because we're using it here in this custom MCP client, which supports it, it displays it. And then for me, I work on making it so that this MCP client has these nice features like expanding and full screen, just to be able to really fully display it in a nice way, since that seems to be the point, right? So yeah, it's a couple of different things, but yeah, think that it could be interesting. Again, I think that from what I've seen, that like there's excitement when it comes to businesses just want, or a lot of certain businesses, like when I've seen like conferences and I've seen these events where they go and they talk about AI chat and they talk about these types of technologies, they like the idea of being in the flow or being where people's habits are moving towards. Like you're in an AI chat room and you want to pay for something, and then it just pops up on the screen and it shows you, here's a Stripe link, go pay for this. And then without having to leave, like for businesses and for a certain segment of businesses, they look at that and they're like, we want to be there. We want to be popping up seamlessly in this person's flow and where all these users are, and being one of those tools. This is like a way to maybe have it a clear way to imagine it.
Legit.
Robert, have you tried this with any other, like using Goose or something to work with?
No, actually, a Goose.
That's not the one. No, that's not it. The one underneath. That's the infrastructure provider. Yeah, it's one of their open source initiatives, and they actually have something you can download. If you can click where it says installation, and then you can go down the road with that. And
this sounds so familiar to me.
One of the reasons I bring it up is that they're an early adopter of MCP. And so the thing I'm curious about is whether your implementation of MCP UI works with clients that are not just the ones that you didn't build. Because that becomes like a tricky thing dealing with UIs, right? Is dealing with the idea of composability at the same time.
Yes. So basically to say that they've created a client that supports MCP UI, and I'm trying to see where this becomes.
They call them extensions.
Okay, I see. So then they get to use extensions and then
I'm relatively new to it. And I haven't done much with the UI stuff yet. I brought it up because it's an early adopter of UI. And I think you doing a bit on UI and like a video on it or what have you in YouTube would be fantastic for you, right? And fantastic for something you'd be able to describe it well and help out. I'm increasingly coming around to talk a bit about the marketing stuff on LinkedIn, but I think YouTube like could be quite powerful for this education-led marketing stuff. That's you're getting to a point where you're doing pretty well on the LI side. And the reason I bring it all up is that I'd be really curious like where the snappy MCP server could work with more clients, and if it can, that increases its return. So we get to kind of like what I was asking about at the beginning, is like, what do we use to build these MCP servers? My thing I'm thinking about a lot is like, where's the money in all this? Where's the business to be done? And I think a lot of it is in the MCP server side, because the MCP client side uses a cool application, but I think longer term, Claude, ChatGPT, what have you, they swallow this piece of the business. And so there's lots of opportunity to make business there. And every time you do things with that, as the AI gets better, your efforts just generate more profit. So that's one of the reasons why I really like this whole MCP UI thing, because it's increasing our ability to take a composed view of this. Instead of we build an app, we build a piece of the puzzle, because with confidence that other pieces are going to fill in, that allow people to get simpler experience.
Yes.
And that way we can just skate where the puck is, not where everybody's having a fight. Excuse me, skate where the puck is going. And everybody else can have their fight where the puck might be today, but we're staying.
Totally true. And I would say that one of the reasons why I've stayed with the CloudFlare setup is because as the market has evolved and as an update would come to Claude Desktop or to any of these clients that I would be using, the MCP server would continue to work flawlessly.
Yes.
And Claude Desktop, even in the beginning, just didn't even support remote servers. And CloudFlare had that great package, the MCP remote package, which allowed you to get past that. And I just found that I would end up getting these updates from people saying, this updated, does the tool still work? Does this still work? Every time I would see that there was maybe some type of configuration issue with, for example, having an MCP server built through Xano. But even still now, the Xano MCP servers, like those links don't really work that nicely, depending wherever else you put them. But I think maybe that's why I've stayed with CloudFlare.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to get this stuff sorted out. I am increasingly wondering whether Xano is really that committed to MCP and whether they're trying to go down the all-in-one agent route instead in terms of their primary modus operandi. And so that's interesting, like new platform, because I had built the first stage change one I built in Xano, and it worked well and it came with here really fast, but it's missing a bunch of things. And now it's been 4 months and nothing's really changed about it. I'm not having a great deal of expectation things are going to change. So I'm looking for what's the next great way to do this.
Yeah. And I think, as you said, that the MCP server always seems to come back as where you can make the biggest, where there's value to be added. And I agree that like this part of the market, even as I'm working on this, and this is great and everything, but I know that, as you said, Claude is the best experience for chatting with these types of interfaces. Like there is certainly a market for people who would want their own custom MCP client side, but at the same time, I think, yeah, like it's always going to be in some level of competition with what these bigger players are building. And it's something that's going to help my own efforts anyways, but nobody else is going to build an MCP server for, some people might, but where I'm focusing on building the MCP server for Xano as an example, it's not just only for Xano, but it'll be for other tools as well. But there's not that much competition. Let's just say it's not like Claude is going to come and build the MCP server for Xano.
I'm not seeing much in the way of competition for MCP servers. I think that's going to be where there's more spread out benefit, a lot less winner take all, as opposed to the client where it's much more of a, usually user facing stuff has a bigger risk of winner take, like Amazon and e-commerce and the potential for OpenAI and with ChatGPT. There's a reason why at the launch for GPT-5, I know I've told times, but like I watched it on with the sound off and I saw a lot of ChatGPT and it seems clear where they're focusing. But I love the UI integration and I think that could just really so expand the universe. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like how tight an integration do you need with the front end in order to allow that kind of back and forth? Because obviously you wrote the front end, or that's your front end, that's your own web app, right? That you made for that client. But does it have to be your front end in order to get benefit from it? Or it could be something else? And then what does that mean for what we want to deploy in terms of people getting the best benefit out of these?
Yeah, I think that's the part where we're all at the mercy of what does Claude decide to adopt and I think that's maybe the part that also put a bit of fire in me to even do this in the first place, because I became a little bit frustrated with the fact of it just felt overdue, that in the sense of I just wanted to be able to use GPT-5, for example, just to be able to use it with the MCP tool in general. And after waiting, and then they just start to feel intentional that they're not releasing it, like for the ChatGPT desktop, for example, it started to feel like, okay, are you going to ever release it? There's that aspect. Yeah. And to say that I think that we're all a bit at the mercy of their decisions. Like they have to adopt even this, for this to be standardized or for this to be compatible with like any one of them, they would have to adopt some of the technology, which MCP UI has came out ahead a little bit in this race, which I don't know too much about the race between what the competitors are. I know there's like AG, and there was, I think also Crayon by Thesis was also giving it a shot. I tried both of those and I did your pro trade, which was just like put two hours towards it or so. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't like this very much. And then I tried this. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, and after an hour or two with this, I'm like, this is yielding some returns. So let's do it. And then Shopify also adopted MCP UI. So this has a bit of steam behind it, but I don't know how much steam it would really take for it to be widely adopted. so that you could hop into Claude.ai and then all of a sudden it's just there. We can just build using that, or hop into ChatGPT and also be supported there. This is just, again, like just my own feelings, which whatever they're worth, but it feels like they're intentionally focusing on just their own in-house integrations rather than opening up to this market and to this technology.
I think this one's probably right. The problem with the protocol approach is that it's messy and that's
Yeah.
slow and it's not under your control. Have you joined the MCP developer Discord yet?
No, I have not.
Yeah, okay. He is, of course, an open source project started by Anthropic, but now has its own stuff going on. And there is a Discord. Previously, there were discussions that are going on in GitHub discussions, and I think they moved a lot of that over to the Disco. And it is, it's interesting because you get to see a lot of like serious enterprise people, like from Oracle, someone from AWS, whatever, like these people who are trying to bring this technology to their various environments, especially because they want it to work with enterprise side tech. Enterprise side data is really the key thing, right? So how it's like what you were working with a multi-value or what have you, is the gets data out and also in, right? But be able to have that communication going back and forth with the things that we need, and using MCP to be able to link to whatever.
Actually, just to mention something about multi-value and universe. So I've been poking a little bit, like people at Rocket, and it's been very productive, actually. There's a bit of education that came, me educating a little bit on explaining what the heck it is and what it does, which just to appreciate a bit that it's not that clear from the outside perspective. But the moment that I drive down to the point of the fact of where they know their technology, the moment that I really drive down to the point that this is using Telnet directly and that this doesn't require any modernization in terms of you don't have to invest, you don't have to change the business logic, you don't have to, like, the moment that kind of clicks, then you get that aha moment. And then you get them wanting to show it to their peers, and by showing, and not to just to their peers, but to their customers. And by them showing it to their customers, it means that their customers, I guess you could say, that they want it, right? And the only person who knows how to build it, at least right now, is yours truly. Yeah, like it has there's a lot of applications for it. And I think this visual side is fantastic and it definitely enhances it. But then before we even get to the visual side, there's a lot that can be gained even just from the fact of like that it's just the fact that you don't have to change your underlying business logic, and you can easily just have it act as RPA to log in and to use the system itself. The people who are working with this technology and they've been working with it for a long time, like that's the point where they start to realize, oh, okay, this is interesting to them.
Super cool. Where are you on your MCP?
I haven't built any real MCP stuff, and I'm really just trying to get on the train here. I have an understanding from watching some of the state change stuff and observing, but I haven't done any building myself, and I'm lagging behind.
Sure. Have you been consuming much though?
I have been consuming mostly just the like state change MCP, like inside Cursor desktop, but I haven't really gone deep into it. But I feel it's time, and so that's why I'm here today.
Super.
And have you used it in terms of just being like for your own like workflow? Like I know there's a side of it that to build the MCP tool, but have you used it in the sense of just even because for me, that's where it started. It was like, oh, this is useful to me. I will solve my own problem. And then that's like the biggest driving force, I think, even for my own motivation with it, is because it's at the very center of what I use. And if I didn't find it so genuinely enabling and useful, I think that it would feel frustrating to me to focus on it. But actually, because I use it so much and because I feel like it creates more capabilities for myself, I find that it doesn't ever feel limiting to ever focus on it. So I guess that's why I'm asking you, like, is there something that applies to what you're trying to do and what your focus is on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So actually, I heavily use, like I was saying, the state change MCP so we've been refactoring like animatics to go from long running synchronous flows to just improving server performance and like shifting everything to a job queue and making it more async. So I found that just being inside, whether it was Claude Desktop or Cursor, being able to like ask questions and like state change questions, it really enabled me. And I would say, yeah, it definitely improved my workflow. And so one of the things that I think held me up from really leaning into it was I've been so laser focused just on Xano, on animatics. I haven't opened up to other things. And then I was hesitant for the longest time, just hesitant to bring like the snappy MCP, for example, into the animatics. I didn't know how it would work. And so I was hesitant there. So yeah, so that was a blocker. But now I'm at a point where I'm trying to open up going beyond just my narrow focus on what I'm working on. And I think, Robert, we talked about it when you and I connected last time. Like, how do you keep looking ahead, not just focusing on what you're doing, but focusing on learning and thinking about the future? And so that is where I'm trying to allocate time. I'm trying to be more disciplined to not just do the work, but also where would you focus, being that the industry is moving so fast and MCP is moving so fast? Where, if you were just getting into it now, like what are some resources that you would focus on? Because I sense that like Xano is not really a place where it seems like it's lagging a bit just from what I've been understanding. And so where would you guys focus? I know, Robert, you've got stuff with CloudFlare, but beyond that, where should I go?
I would say, for me, at least, I would say that CloudFlare, I mean, in the sense of basically whatever is the point of least resistance, right? And the point that also just allows you to navigate freely into different directions, which is why I think CloudFlare is, to me, seems to be that place where you can leverage a lot of capability that allows you to be able to build and also build in a way that serves you well into the future. As protocols change, I have found that I've been served well by Cloudflare because it has not required me to rewire a whole bunch of stuff. I feel like they've done a great job with their SDK to avoid me having to do that. That has been great. And so it's allowed me to focus on the other stuff that I think matter to a business, which is, can you secure this? Can you make it authorized? Can you focus on how do you design these tools? So that's why I think Cloudflare is a great place to start, because you're going to just have that foundation where you can get your hands dirty with the OAuth and with all those things and figure out and really understand how it works and how to make it work for your purposes. But at the same time, it's not going to put so much on you in terms of just drowning you with a lot of custom setup. I think it's just good to start with a remote MCP. Just in general, good to just focus on, first of all, make it remote. That's the best, whatever way it takes. And that's why I think Cloudflare is a great direction, because already that means it's shareable. And because it's shareable, it means other people can use it. And if it's not shareable, then there's no point to it. Like, that means we're just building it for ourselves, and then it doesn't do anything for the business, or at least not in the way that we're talking about, right? Like for selling services. That's always been my main focus with all this stuff is I'm going to build this. I'm going to build the Xano tool, but how do I share it with people? That was always a part of my problem, was always two parts. It was always, okay, I want to solve this technical problem, but I want other people to use this tool, and how can they use it, and so on. And so that's why I would say that whatever way that you go about it, it has served me very well to always keep that in mind of, okay, I'm building this and I have to, as soon as possible, set this up for myself in a way that whatever updates I make to it, whatever else I do to it, is going to be accessible to the other people who are using it as well. And that's going to create like a multiplier on anything I do. It means that it's going to go out to the other people as well, because other people are like, whoever I provide these services to, presumably they want to share with other people. They're not just using it themselves. That's a quality that they're looking for as well in the solution. So I would keep my eye on that. I think that's what comes to mind for me. But Ray, I would love to turn it over to you to get your thoughts on.
Yeah, I don't think there are many tools out there that are great for building these right now. I think that the tooling is not fantastic. The Claude code actually is interesting for this one because they use the LLMs TXT that's already available through the MCP mod protocol, and they've tested, right? I like doing this. If you haven't done code stuff before, it's actually, I think, a decent way to dive in because it's a thoughtful, modern protocol. You're not trying to learn a bunch of really old stuff. People get to use the current standards and ways of thinking. It's TypeScript, which makes it far more legible. The AI is able to guide you along. I've actually been thinking about this problem, trying to make them easier to stand up. And because I'm thinking about moving off of Xano, because Xano's moving like molasses. I have seen Daniel work on the MCP, so I think that's coming at some point for Xano, but it's just like, it's being dragged along kicking and screaming, and I'm concerned that's just not going to be where their big focus is. So I'm looking for alternative ways to be building. Right now, the main way I'm thinking about it is to use some combination of the main SDK, a bit of templating, a bit of vibe coding help, and then Google Cloud Run to actually run these things. I'm a big fan of that as a serverless platform. It's hefty. It can do a lot. It's not the absolute cheapest of the platforms, but that's not what we're looking for right now. We're looking for something that can have some meat on the bone, and then just handle the streaming and whatever out of that. And that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Like, each of my MCP servers would be one GCR instance or one GCR server, right? And then deal with scaling issues or whatever just out of letting it auto scale. And that because there's nothing about MCP that should be about an instant, right? Because a machine versus having something be serverless. And that would really drive down costs as well. I think it'd be pennies per month to support. question is really the building it and then the maintaining of it. And then what does that part look like? And one of the reasons I asked you, hey, how else can I build this question is because I'd love to not be in that business. Let somebody else do it. Everyone knows their way around it. But then really just like, and I think the way that you're doing it, Robert, is really the right way, which is you have your MCP server and then it's a gateway, right? It's bouncing to some other API endpoints.
Yes, which is a whole other, there's that whole middleware side to it and it's just a design of that. But actually, Ray, I was going to ask you, because is there something about the Cloudflare approach that doesn't, I'm just wondering what you think about Cloudflare.
I think they're doing a wonderful job. It's very all-in-one. So part of the benefit for me is I'm trying to break it down and understand what's going on at the low levels of protocol and it's at that lower level that I really want to play and dive in. So for me, getting into the guts of it and having it be more observable is valuable. So I'll be looking to Cloudflare, looking into a GCR approach, and I'm pretty sure it'll be like marginally cheaper to distribute on Cloudflare, but like pennies versus tens of pennies is not really what keeps me up at night. My focus is on, okay, what can I do that would make a really more extraordinary experience, which is why what you were showing for MCP, so much more interesting. How into MCP is Cloudflare? I don't know. I don't know if stuff really relates to it or matters, what have you, but I'm looking to like, how can you have the most advanced server, right? That's really pushing us more towards what's more agentic. And I'm thinking about like, how can I distribute and have an easier way of managing and maintaining both MCP and A2M, because those are really zones, and then how to be looking at from the point of view of one, how to stand it up, what's the underlying technology, how to get it running in a public cloud relatively easily, but then, and I think this is a key one, how to get it to stand up in like an enterprise environment, like behind a corporate firewall, right? And which I think would also be a upper thing. And now I'm not thinking about remote anymore, thinking about GCR, I'm thinking about how to put it into a virtual machine, right? That could, or a machine environment in any event, that could be sitting inside Azure private cloud or an on-premise machine distributed using an OVA using VMware, or even like a little piece of hardware. Hey, here's MCP as a box. And I think the more a question for me is going to be building, managing, and distributing, right? And those are not all the same problem. And me figuring out which of those is hard and which of those is going to really drive more value. I think right now, all of them have a certain degree of difficulty to them. I hadn't seen an easier way of building MCP than what BuildShip and Xano are doing, right? They're both going down a pretty cool path. Now it's sometimes fast. And I don't want to be downstream of a slow process. Right. I want to be out there, what can be done to better help clients and companies, not when some other party has decided to get around to it. You want a partner that's more leverage, partner I can trust to move faster. I want to be the one who's holding up the show. And that's why Cloudflare is really interesting. They're moving fast. It's also why going even more to the source, what's going on in the open source people, and being able to read the tea leaves. Oh, this is where things are.
Yeah.
Have you heard that Vercel is restricting which clients can work with its MCP server?
Oh, really?
Particularly using OAuth like you are right now, Robert. There's an issue of dynamic client registration, right? Like how do you need to allow the client or whatever to say, yes, I'm actually this client and I would like to be able to use you right now, right? So when you've integrated with federated authentication stuff, you need to get those two pieces of information and they're used as part of that dance. Similarly, here, you're going to need to have that dance between the client, which is the agent or the chat or whatever, and the server in order to make OAuth work. Now, what Google does, it makes you go through this whole manual process, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to have a whole manual process to allow these other agents. How do you allow them in? And this is where dynamic client registration or DCR becomes a piece of the puzzle. Now, I'm bringing all this stuff up because there's not only is there a question of how to allow it, but also how to restrict it. Maybe you don't want to allow DCR. Maybe you only want to allow Cursor from my company to be allowed in. And that would be a real consideration. And how do you manage that? I think those kinds of security and integration questions are going to become big questions for how to get more value out of MCP in environments that care about governance, which is really any environment that gets beyond the small to medium business. Daniel's got the DDIA behind him, which is a great book, particularly on what businesses care about. I want a process that is repeatable, that has tests to it, right? I want to be able to have a certain amount of scale, particularly as it relates to the data, even if not the compute. I want to be able to move relatively quickly. I'd like it to be distributed. And you don't need to tackle all these concerns at the same time, but these are the concerns that meaningful companies have when they're looking to actually put this stuff to work. Otherwise, you're just talking to a bunch of startups. And when you are a startup, you don't want to talk to a bunch of startups. It's the poor talking to the poor. When you're a bigger company, yeah, sure, there could be very interesting plays in going talking to startups. Unless, of course, you're talking to startups who then turn into big companies, which is a bet that a lot of people make, but is not, it doesn't work out nearly as well because more of them are going to crash or stay small than actually soar. And so like, how can you be around those that are on that either the upward trajectory or have hit the higher plateau? And then what do they care about that's different than what we care about? And that's why infrastructure.
It's really, as you talk about actually where your interest is and your focus is, it actually starts to remind me, as you said, like how it's an all-in-one platform, like with Cloudflare, and as much as there are conveniences with that to
Mhm.
to try to get in the way of, okay, now they have that they've wrapper that still requires you to work nicely with it. And then if you want to, let's say, cut off access at any time, or if you want to monitor, if you want to control it, you're at the mercy a little bit of working within that existing framework. And I can just say from whatever, like my experience with whatever energy I've put towards it, which not to say that it's impossible to do at all. Like it's just maybe today, if I was to revisit it, it might be a different experience. It's finicky, right? Like when you start to mess around with it a bit, it wants to work the way that it works, and it's not exposing a way that's very convenient in order to get all the information that you want and so on. And also, just as you were saying, there is a certain way that of communicating with it that now is starting to make me wonder if that's a Cloudflare implementation, or is that a general model context protocol implementation? When what I mean by that is just how the clients communicate to them. As you said, this is who I am and this is the client, like identifying itself. And when it comes to using that with Cloudflare, it identifies itself by first actually waiting for an error. What it's expecting is actually, because it's an OAuth procedure, the client, for it to go through that process, it first is expecting an error message, which it has to be actually first an error message. And then after it gets the error message, it makes a certain request back, which lets it know, okay, this is actually, we need to redirect you to the link where you're going to actually go and do the sign in. And so that's always part of the flow. And that's a coordination that happens between the client and the server. But as you said, then there's a question of, okay, is that a Cloudflare thing? Is that something that's going to be true all the time? Maybe not. And so, yeah, just now I'm starting to also realize that, as you said, like why Cloudflare? And now I'm also realizing, like I wonder what walls am I surrounded by that I might not have been necessarily aware of. But again, like the reason why I'm not aware of those walls is because it hasn't become an issue. So far, I haven't seen any like situations where it said, oh, this doesn't work. To the contrary, I've seen it work continuously. And I would just say that probably it's a good place, as you said, Ray, to just learn more about it, right? I've found that just by going, as time goes on, and me just asking questions to the AI about how does this work, just explain it to me. I don't have like objective necessarily at that time of, but I want to do this. I just want to understand. And by me just recording myself and asking questions towards it, it allows me to then be able to ask these types of questions, because then I just become more aware of the question. At one point before, I couldn't even comprehend. I didn't even know the right question to ask. But there's like that question, robots. I'm sorry, my answers are limited. You must ask the right questions. And I'm not sure if I'm Sunny or who's Sunny or who's Will Smith, but it's a great way for me to learn more about it, because it has an abstractions on top of it to make my life more convenient, but it's not a black box. It's all the code is there, which I can't really say for, if I'm going to do that with Xano, that I can't, it's a black box. I can't really see under, at least like maybe you could, but it's not that convenient just using the Cloudflare SDK.
My commitment for next week is I'm going to come back having built a different piece of technology and just see and
Very
if
cool.
there's interest, I can talk a little bit about that experience, but I think that's kind of what I got coming up.
Yeah, I thank you guys for a discussion today. It was a pleasure. And I think it also just gives me actually more to think about than anything. I feel to figure out now, what else can I do on the MCP client side? Or is it, sorry, sorry, Ray.
I was going to ask, what's going to be true for you next week regarding MCP?
I think what's going to be true for me next week is
mastermind stuff.
Yeah. What will be true for me next week? I'm trying to do less, if that sounds funny in a way, but I'm trying to do less on my side and find out more about what other people think, because I could keep doing this all day. I could do this forever, it seems. And that's what I like about the technology, because it never ends. And it just appeals to me in that way, because it, like, in a very dangerous way, I just will keep going on and keep going. But what I'm trying, between today and next week, what I'm trying to do is put it in front of people who have their own interests and they have their own context. And it's almost like a Rorschach test. I want to show them the image and I just want to see what their interpretation of it is. And yeah, just even like right now, just hearing about how your feedback and Ray and like your perspective on it, like already just added on top of it, just unlocked certain things in my mind, which now gives me a lot to think about. And like, it was already there, but just with a little bit extra of perspective now, it actually makes it useful. It takes that experience I had and yeah, The experience was already there, but I just hadn't really realized what was right in front of me. Trying to achieve more of that, I think, is my goal for the next 7 days.
All right.
Absolutely. Next week, I will have explored CloudFlare at the very least.
Great. Thank you guys.
Guys.
See you.